All right, welcome to the 18th Quadcast with our same group of characters that we like to bring in every month to talk about what's going on in the credit and collections industry. I'm Steve Ruderman. This is the Credit and Collection News Quadcast, excuse me. With us today are Stefanie Jackman, Rob Grafrath, Joann Needleman, and of course, John McNamara. We're going to go ahead and talk about some of our favorite topics in the credit and collection news and what's been happening over the past month in June. First of all, we have a potential new leader at the CFPB. Brian Johnson has been nominated by Trump. He is a former director, not a full director, assistant director from the CFPB. Also comes from within the credit and collection news industry. Credit and collections industry from Cap One. So let's talk a little bit about this nomination, and we'll kind of just run right through the group and stuff. I see John shaking his head yes. So I take it, John, you want to start and talk a little bit about this nomination and what you think?
No surprise that you called on me there, Steve. I'm totally yeah, you caught me looking. No, I love this pick. And I'll let me give you a context. I love it because a CFPB that tries to do as much as it can and should do statutorily can be a bulwark against states sort of trying to do it themselves. And again, states may have a lot of resources, but we all know that they're never as good as the federal government at this kind of stuff. They're more subject to the vicissitudes of state legislatures, which are this might be like a low bar, but they're less informed than the U.S. Congress. But for a lot of reasons, but also I like this because Brian Johnson, I think he's a good policy guy. Like he thinks serious grown-up thoughts about policy. He's thought about that for a long time. He was a longtime member of the House Financial Services Committee. He was there when I was there, and I'll give you a quick story. One is the main reason I like this is he's a good fit. He's a good kind of director you would expect in a sane world, coming from a Trump administration, not a director that wants to kill the very thing that he's supposed to run, but somebody that would actually want to do good. And I know that he believes in following the statute and following the law. But quick story, the worst thing Brian Johnson did with the help of Mick Mulvaney when he was at the CFPB before was rearranging the letters CFPB to BCFP. And at the time, people were horrified. And I even saw some people crying up over that, tearing up over that. And it's kind of like, okay, well, roll the clock forward and look what happened since. It's like what Brian Johnson and Mick Mulvaney's worst day was oh, happy day at the Bureau. But no, quick experience. He does believe in the statute and following the statute. And because of that, I was terrified that he would go like strict statutory interpretation of the Card Act report, which is one of the many babies that I had within markets. That's a wonderful piece of work led for years by Wei Zhang. And so he edited the first draft of this. And I'm like, oh, he's a statutorialist. He's going to cut us back and won't let us put all this wonderful information that's used for policymakers. So it's a Sunday afternoon. I walk into the office at 1700 G. I go to my office. Things dark. There's a light on, and it's Austin Mueller, really awesome analyst who's still at the Bureau. And he had a big part in writing this Card Act report. And he goes, I got Brian Johnson's edits. And I snatched it out of his hand because I thought it was going to be like cutting everything. It was like, they were reasonable and they were minor and they were thoughtful edits, and they weren't like the horrible draconian let's do nothing thing that I feared. And like I said, as time went on, I thought he was a good, serious policymaker. I went to his farewell happy hour, when he left the Bureau to go back into private sector. So great pick. I think it gives hope for the Bureau. I hope the Democrats will get him on the thing and get him approved because, they delayed, what's his name, Jonathan McKernan, and look what happened with that delay.
Crickets.
Yeah. No, not crickets, like fricking pesticide. I mean, in comes Russell Vogt as the interim and basically tried to wipe the damn thing out. And quite frankly, that was bad news for responsible industry as well as for consumers.
No, I agree. When I meant crickets, I meant our guys were you guys were like crickets.
No,
I
we were
was.
waiting for John to finish. You know, he
Yeah.
You didn't want to
I've
break,
You
been
can always
waiting
talk.
break
for a
into the
long
story
time.
because
These
Yeah.
I was gonna
these
say
guys have never
I've
been
never
so
heard you guys
respectful of me. I'm a
quiet.
little bit
Yeah.
I'm a little bit worried. You're being too respectful. I'm
No,
uncomfortable.
I mean, no, I agree. I think it's a great pick. My question is why he's doing it, because it's not going to be he's not going to have a long tenure. If there is a change of administration, the likelihood is, obviously he's going to get fired. Forget what happened yesterday at the Supreme Court, but uh, all directors now at the CFPB serve at the pleasure of a president. And if there is a new president and a new administration, he's gone. So, you're looking at a year and a half. Again, what can you accomplish? The other thing too is, it's a shell. The Bureau is a shell of itself, right, John? It's not, its budget is half. The ability, how many people are working there? I mean, what can they do? So I just question, I do think it's a great choice. I wish they would have gone with him 2 years ago.
Amen.
Someone that would have been able to go in and sustain and kind of steer the ship in a better direction. I thought he was a great deputy director. And we've said all in this podcast many times, I thought that Kathy Kraninger was probably the best director in doing the work of a bureaucrat and running an agency. I say Portray did run the agency very well. He just was politically motivated, but that's okay. But I kind of question, hopefully, he's not going to get nominated till well into the fall, maybe, or his hearing is not going to happen till well into the fall. And God knows what will happen with that. So he's got a very short tenure, and what impact he can make in that short period of time, given the structure of the Bureau now and its limited resources, remains to be seen. And I don't know what his motivation is at this point. So
Yeah, that is a great point, because again, Brian Johnson's not somebody that would have a hard time finding a job. It's not like he needed this job.
no, and he's got a good job at Capital One, and it's certainly not, he doesn't have all eyes on him. He can do what he needs to do. I mean, this is, as anybody who's sat in that position, it's a tough, Congress has not made that role, and the politicalization of the CFPB has not made it easy for anybody to come in. It's not a coveted role anymore.
But do you think that he's business friendly enough and he's centrist enough that he won't be blocked, that it won't just go back to party lines the same way as it always seems to?
See, that's what
I mean.
I was voicing my fear about that. Is, I mean, if the Democrats could roll the clock back and get McKernan confirmed, like get him on the schedule, get him confirmed, would the Bureau be in would it be in the ridiculous position that it's in now?
No.
Or because McKernan, I think, again, like Johnson, not nearly as informed of this kind of policy as Johnson. McKernan was a serious mid-career bureaucrat that sort of looked towards the future. I don't think he wanted to be tied to decimating a federal agency. And I don't think that's Brian Johnson either. But just to be clear, he reminds me of Tom Paul in some ways, and Tom Paul, whom I hold in very high regard, made the mistake. Industry thought Tom was their friend and made the mistake of acting like he was their friend. No, Tom, this was when he was at FTC, he said, make no mistake, I'm a law enforcement professional. Like, industry that breaks the law will face the wrath of Brian Johnson, just as they should from anyone.
Well,
he's not
I was just going to say that's kind of not that that's the wrong person for the position. That really is the right person for the position.
Yes.
Because if you are going to lead the
Steve.
CFPB and you run, you got to run down the middle. And you know what, Kathy Kraninger, she was a great leader for the CFPB, but she definitely did not, she wasn't just pro business all the time. She was actually she jumped on the regulations. She made sure you're following the rules and stuff. And I know when she's spoken to the group and stuff at our shows, she made it clear, and she stayed with that. Now she is much more industry friendly now. Obviously, she's running the Florida bankers, but she sees it from the banker's standpoint, and she's managing exactly the same way that she ran the CFPB. The CFPB has their rules. And that doesn't mean, hey, industry can just go run off on a tangent and screw the consumer. No, that's not going to happen. And she kept the CFPB in line. to do that. So I think, as far as the director goes, this is kind of what the CFPB needs. Now the question becomes, because he was nominated by Trump, are the Democrats going to say, well, it doesn't matter who he nominates, we're against him?
Mhm.
That's
Or are
what
they going to
happened with
sit?
Kathy.
That's exactly what I thought.
Yeah.
That's what happened
Yeah.
with Kathy. I mean,
Right.
remember, Kathy had more enforcement actions in her tenure than Richard Cordray did. The problem all of a sudden became, well, you weren't enforcing enough, or the amounts were too small, or, it wasn't as splashy, but then we get into all of the nuance of that. And,
Right.
Yeah, actually, famously, there were headlines that Kathy Kraniger had more enforcement actions than Rohit Chopra when Chopra had been there for a minute.
I agree. I agree. And, some of the big ones that we're talking about now were started by Kathy Kraniger.
And also credit to Brian, if you're in this industry, Reg F went through its final cuts under Kathy and Tom Paul and Brian Johnson.
Yep.
Stefanie, what are your thoughts?
I think everyone's raising really good points. I have no idea why they waited until now. It was a surprise. I guess they had to nominate somebody because there are limits on how long somebody can serve in an acting role. And then I don't know where we are in that, but it would have, I think if I recall correctly.
August 1st.
Thank you. It's coming up.
Here's the real puzzle. I'm sorry, Stefanie, but here's the real puzzler. They had just put in Mark Paletta, who is, Russell Vought's lieutenant, as the deputy director, meaning that when Russell's term runs out August 1st,
that's who would have taken over.
Paletta could have been that guy forever, a direct report of Russell Vought, and the continuation of the Russell Vought sort of punishment and torture of bureau staff would have continued. So when I went from reason to mope when they did that to, whoa, somebody at the White House must have had a big change of heart to have made this move, because they could have continued this same Russell Vought tenure under Mark Paletta indefinitely, but they didn't, which is just a real puzzler, unless the White House said, wait a minute, affordability matters to the voters, and the Bureau might be a good vehicle to sort of push that agenda, and therefore we need a serious person to run it.
Well, on top of that,
maybe
don't
they
sort of have to nominate somebody at this point? I mean, the Bureau, the administration is on record multiple times with a court of law saying that we do not intend to close down the Bureau. We do have things it needs to do. We're setting agendas. They're running out of time on the acting position, and nominating Brian Johnson, which, by the way, just to be on the record, I also agree that is a very sound, I think appropriate nomination. I have not said that about some of the other nominees over the years that, just we think are just a holder or political place. He has a track record, as you all pointed out. He has a track record under a bureau that I think at the time, you're correct, was criticized for not being aggressive enough. But looking back, if you're being fair as a member of Congress, did a pretty good job. And the world wasn't falling. And, at least for more moderate Democrats, it might make it a little bit more of a difficult case to just adhere to the party line when they go home to face their constituents in a time of an affordability crisis for many Americans, when you have a legitimate nominee with a track record. So it could be very, very smart. It could just be that we're running out of time. It could be that there's other things at play. But I think where we currently sit, it's a very appropriate nomination that perhaps people who can be bipartisan could get behind to lead the Bureau in a direction of resuming its role, however this administration sees that role, as a regulator for the financial services industry. And we need that. We need it on a number of fronts. Also keep in mind, to your point, John, and I think you said it too, Joann, it could be very short-lived, because at this point, we know we can already fire the CFPB director without cause, but given the Supreme Court's decision yesterday, seems like pretty much everybody except Federal Reserve, maybe. I haven't had a chance to digest
Yeah,
it.
no.
Yeah.
Yeah, but only if they file the right paperwork.
Yes, I'm
Yeah.
afraid after yesterday,
before they say you're fired. Yeah.
yes, I'm afraid after yesterday, Humphreys needs an executor because he did. He did.
Well, he's dead twice.
Yes.
It's
Well, you know what? I think, Stephanie, you make a great point. How relevant now are these agencies? You know, these are at this point now cabinet positions because they serve at the pleasure of the president. They, you know, they're not, quote, independent. They never were, but now, now it's been codified that they're not independent. And how relevant are they anymore? I mean, these are just, they always were part of the executive branch, but now they are just an offshoot of who is ever in the White House. And I think, you know, the jump, I don't know if anybody saw yesterday, but our friend Rohit was on CNN. They were doing a piece on it. Yeah. And, you know, he didn't answer the question. Of course, he had to go back into the talking points of what's the Democratic, you know, the DSA talking points are of the moment. He had to just go right into that, not about what does this mean for independent agencies.
Yeah.
But given that, I mean, how relevant are these agencies anymore? And, you know, they're all jumping up and down saying it's horrible. Well, wait until, you know, Gavin Newsom or whoever's going to be president next. I'm not making any predictions, but you get a Democratic president, you know, wait till you see how the Republicans are going to be all upset about who's sitting at the CFPB, and whomever at all the other agencies. So it is short-sighted as always, and it's going to impact everybody. It's going to impact a lot of industries. I think it's unfortunate. And it's also going to impact who's going to want to roll at these agencies anymore. You know, it was a big deal to be the head of the CFPB or the FTC. These agencies now are irrelevant. Although I will say the FTC is doing a lot of work. I'll give, you know, what is his name, Christian Mufarage or whatever.
Chris
A lot of
Mufarage.
credit.
Yeah.
I mean, they're
I
doing
know.
real work there at the FTC. You know, whether you think it's good enough.
BCP's dropping some good cases.
Yeah,
No,
I mean,
they-
they're
they-
bringing.
they
they're-
literally today they went they just announced the fine against Amazon for
Yeah, I mean, so
violation
they're-
of the Fair Credit Reporting Act. So I mean,
right. So they're doing real work, but
the FTC always has. The FTC has always
Yes.
been. You know, they're the they used to be like they were the enforcement group. They just were not big enough to basically go after everybody. They had to pick and choose who they had. So they tried to go after the bad players. And again, industry was usually supportive of an FTC that was going after bad players, as well as supportive against if an AG was actually.
I got to throw the BS flag.
Huh?
There was a time where I'm convinced the FTC, because they had limited resources, they found a way to get a consent order against all the big agencies. And I think that was their way to control it. American Creditors Bureau back in the day, GC Services, United Recovery. I mean, the second document I signed as a new employee in this industry in 1983 was a consent decree from the FTC. They kept the bigger one. It's almost like supervision by enforcement, where they kept big agencies under a consent decree where they had to report. So they didn't always go after the worst of the worst. They definitely, if you were a big agency, you probably had tangled with FTC. And I'm going way back to the 80s and 90s. And again,
well, you know, so some of us aren't that old, John.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was 5 when
But
you
also, I
talked
mean,
about that.
listen, the FTC's never been as political as the CFPB, but there was always an element of that, right? Because you've got 3 Dems and 2 Republicans, or 3 Republicans and 2
you don't
Dems.
have that anymore. That's the problem.
No.
You don't have that.
No, you don't.
So the argument,
not,
you know,
no.
and all
Now,
the
in a just-
arguments of making CFPB a commission, that went out the door, you know, yesterday
And-
too. So
And in a just world, the Senate would say, okay, if Humphrey's executor is dead, then we as the Senate have a responsibility to highly, highly vet any candidate that needs Senate confirmation and not allow, you know, any idiot or any political hack to come in and run an independent agency. Do I think that's going to happen? No, absolutely not. But you know, in a wishful, hopeful world, that's exactly what would happen.
All right. Well, hey, you know what? That's No, I would call that almost consensus from this group as far as where we're at right now on the CFPB nomination, which is hey, I'm good with that. I'm good with that.
Godspeed, Brian Johnson.
Yeah.
There you go. Let's get that through, and then let's get the CFPB back to where the CFPB needs to be on working that. Let's talk a little bit about Rob. I know you've been frothing at the mouth to talk about this.
Mhm.
But
Impatient.
the U.S. government issued the directive to suspend access to Fable 5 and Mythos 5. Let's talk about that and how that's going to, when they ordered Anthropic to suspend access, what that's going to do to not only our industry but overall the effects on that. So I'm going to turn this over to you, Rob, and
Yeah.
let's get a little feedback here.
All right. So I finally get to earn my keep here. It's been a few podcasts since we've had a purely technical item, and that's right in my vein. You you kind of, for some background on this, back at the beginning of the month, we had Anthropic did a big, almost dire sort of announcement that they had this Mythos, or maybe it was the beginning of last month. Anyway, just very recently, they had Mythos 5, which was this incredibly dangerous AI model that could take and take something like Linux, which is like just rock solid, secure, trusted, open source application used in devices and computers worldwide for years and years, and it found a chain of exploits that it could employ to take a regular user and escalate its security level to that of a root user and do whatever it wants on a Linux system. Right, and this is a hack that's evaded humans, obviously since Linux was created, because otherwise that would have been patched by now. And so they announced this capability, and that it had found in every single major browser, every single major operating system, these kind of 0-day, they call them, vulnerabilities, that as soon as it got out the first day, it would wreak havoc on anyone running those software programs. So along with that, they announced Project Glasswing, which was their attempt to help to use it to buffer security, to give it to the major players and say, hey, we're going to give you Mythos, Microsoft and Apple and Amazon and everybody. We're going to give you your own copy so you can use this very powerful AI tool to help secure your systems, before the bad guys also reach this level of AI sophistication and can use a model like this to hack your software because it has a vulnerability. Here it is. We found it. And they published the vulnerabilities to these companies. They found them. So Glasswing and Mythos were a thing, and then they finally decided that those companies had enough time and that they put enough guardrails around Mythos to have a consumer friendly, like a consumer ready version, so that if a consumer, a regular person, tried to use it to say, hey, tell me how do I hack Linux, it would revert down to a lower level model. It would block that attempt to use it for hacking purposes. And again, this is a reminder that Mythos isn't like a hacking LLM. Like, this is just
and report you to Homeland Security.
What's that?
And report you to Homeland Security and all local authorities at the same time. Just check all the boxes.
Well, that's the problem, because they didn't play nice. Now this is everyone speculating, but because Anthropic said, hey, we're not going to let you use our models to take human lives, and we're not going to allow you to weaponize our LLMs. Well, the administration didn't like to hear that. They don't like being told no. So they were being labeled like a supply chain threat, and the way that the administration then, when Fable came out, decided, no, we're going to squash this whole Fable thing, was export controls. So they because they made it so that only, like, you couldn't have anyone that was a not like a U.S. citizen, like a foreign national, something like that. And how do you enforce anything like that? That's absurd, right? You can't say, if you're if you're not a non-US person, then you can't use this. Well, how's a company supposed to know who the user is, that if what their citizenship is?
So is it a
So-
little bit like the executive order on debanking of non-Americans?
Yeah, it's like, so how do you monitor that? How do you enforce that? How can you tell that they're not Americans? It's like telling Walmart, if they're an undocumented immigrant, that you can't sell them produce or something. Like, okay, well, no more produce at Walmart, anybody, because how the heck are they supposed to know? So this effectively shut down Fable. Fable was released to the public. I was using it for a glorious week or so before, and it was great. It was a very capable model. It was a lot of fun before it got shut down, and now they're in talks, of course. But a little. This is not, although I think it's seen as a bit unprecedented. It's not entirely, because if you wheel back the hands of time back to when I was a junior in high school, John, this will tell you, this will date you a little bit. Back in 1995, that they there was a encryption called PGP, Pretty Good Privacy. You remember the PGP
I
scandals?
do.
Yeah, I wasn't paying enough attention to politics at the time, but so this is me reading history books that they tried to do the same sort of thing. So that PGP is munitions. They labeled it as exporting munitions because it's encryption and it allows foreign actors to encrypt data, and that's a security threat to the U.S. So PGP's their response to that, which was just magnificent. They printed the entire code base as a book, as a physical book, and said, "Here is what we're exporting. It's a book, freedom of speech. You can't regulate this as munitions." And it that little stunt worked. Nothing like that is going to work for this particular problem,
And
but it
hey,
is kind of in
Rob,
similar vein, right? The way that
yeah,
they try to use export controls to shut down a technology.
and
And
Anthropic is actually reminding users, right, when you go in, why they can't use
There's
what
this
they
this
there's
oh
thing
yeah,
is
yeah. There's a
discontinued.
little thing.
no, you
They want you to know.
Yeah.
Claude reminds me that I can't use the best stuff because
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry,
which
Well,
we got shut down.
so
Go
let
ahead,
me
Johnny.
play devil's advocate just for 1 minute, because Rob, you know this certainly better than I ever will. But looking at it from a regulatory perspective, I mean, isn't this what you get if you want the federal government to have control over AI, which is the whole argument that we've had in other podcasts? Do you want the states doing it, or do you want the federal government? I mean, there is trade-offs. Look, we want the federal government to do it because we need uniformity of practice and understanding, at one level where we all need to be, rather than having different states. But on the flip side of that, you get this mess. So
Yeah,
where's
heavy-handed,
the
right?
happy,
And now you
without
said
being
uniformity.
Pollyanna about this, where's the happy medium here? Because we've got to figure it out. The state issue right now, I'm sure Stefanie can elaborate a lot more than me, but I got, clients trying to deal with Connecticut and Colorado and Washington, and every day there's a new statute with a new definition of what a frontier developer is, or whether they're going to be,
Mhm.
that agency is going to fall within the statute. I mean, it's becoming a little bit of a whack-a-mole. So I don't know what the better end of this is, but there's good and bad to both. And I think Rob, you've articulated the bad part of it.
And I agree that we do, right? We do want a federal uh, uh, control on the AI tools, because they've proven, yes, they can be quite dangerous. But we also want evenly weighed analysis on any AI tool sets, any frontier models that are being shut down. The same test. So the test that they did, it was Amazon, for whatever reason. They were being the bad guys. They took Fable. They said, they gave it some code. They said, fix this code, and Fable did it. It did some security fixes. It says, here you go. This is what would make it better and more secure. And it's like, aha, because really, security and hacking are really just two sides of the same coin. You use the same tools to hack software as you do to secure that software, right? So because they said fix this code and it's to expose all these vulnerabilities. But if you take that same prompt, you do that to the same code on any of the other frontier models, and it does the same thing. Yet we don't see Google and OpenAI getting shut down. Anthropic was singled out in this
But wasn't they singled
particular
out because
case.
they were having a beef with the Pentagon at the time?
That's those of us playing politics on the sideline. We think maybe that
I'm
might have
just
something to do with
asking
it.
for a friend.
Yeah. There you go. There you go.
They're not going to admit to
By
that.
the way, the Pentagon just called Joann and they asked
Okay.
me to
Don't
mute
tell
me,
them where I
please.
live,
Yeah,
please.
there you go. Yeah.
Rob, when you hear that door knock at your door, don't answer it.
Run,
Yeah.
run.
Can we get like a witness protection thing on my
like voice modulation or
Yeah,
something?
a little blur on the.
I'll put out my video.
Yeah, no, there, yeah, it's there. Well, New York just announced, the Department of Financial Services just said they actually have their eye on artificial intelligence, so that they want to, there's some regulation that they're contemplating and doing, and it's a little scary when the New York State DFS wants to start doing some regulation on what happens to AI, and right now they're just saying they're looking into it, and the question really is, who at the DFS is really looking into this, and do they have the expertise at the DFS, to want to regulate this? And that's a little bit, when you start saying, okay, is a state going to start regulating AI? And Colorado is a prime example of, even their own AG is a little bit concerned about, how do you follow their own laws? How do you manage this? And, how do you get to
Yeah.
a point where, do the feds have to do more, overall rule making, or not?
We're kind of balancing on this knife's edge here, because at the same time we want US technology and US based AI to be the leader, to be the world leader here. So export controls on like physical chips, right? We have there's chips that are specifically used for AI models, which the export controls don't allow us to export those to China, for example. And that, I suppose that's kind of reasonable. So I don't really necessarily have problems with that. China, you have DeepSeek, which is another very popular model, I believe, came out of China. But if you, like, the White House, it seems like, what was it, December? They said we want to put a ban on any AI legislation. I think statewise. I think they were like, let's not let any states have any AI legislation. Right. But at the same time, then here we are a few months later, and they're taking their own heavy-handed squashing of models because and in I don't want to say, I'm going to defend the administration in this, but Anthropic did come out like with some scary stuff about this model. They were like, man, this thing's doing some scary stuff, and by the way, here it is, everyone, let's use it, but we put guardrails, so don't worry. So maybe that was a little bit hoist by their own petard, sort of. They shouldn't have come out saying that it was quite as hacker friendly and capable as they did.
Well, definitely. The question kind of becomes, is where do we go from here? And I don't really know the answer to that, but how do you control it without controlling it? So that you've got the best of both worlds doing that. Otherwise, you're going to have kind of the mess that we're sitting in right now. Is hey, we know that there's something better out there, but we're not really sure you should use it yet. I mean, so that's from every standpoint, and I'm sure Stefanie and Joann, you're probably hearing from big clients that are like, okay, so how do we manage this?
Yeah, how's the rubber meet the road on this, and how does it impact our industry? I think is really what I'm trying to think of. How do we navigate this? Of course, one of them is, well, be careful about getting too tied to any particular model, any frontier model, because it could be gone tomorrow at the whim of the administration. But other than that, things are just accelerating so quickly that the agencies I work with, a lot of times they kind of feel like they know they need to do something, but they're not entirely sure what that should be.
Sure.
But
Rob,
go ahead.
there's a CRM or two I wish would anger the administration.
Yeah, get those guys shut down.
Well, I think what we're seeing, the difficulty that I'm seeing from a lot of my clients is what the governance structure within the organization needs to look like to address these changes, which are happening daily. I mean, it's,
Mhm.
so the conversations that we're having is about what does your AI governance committee look like? How do we need how does our board or highest governing body have to interact with IT? How do we look to our vendors who are bringing in AI into our businesses? And it's really a daily conversation. You used to have compliance meetings, once a week or whatever. These AI meetings are happening every day. And it is really hard because there's competing forces. There is the ability to compete with, the agency down the block who's using different technology. You want to always be ahead of that. There's regulatory pressures. We're seeing it in examinations with respect to AI. They want you to explain how it works. They want to understand your algorithms. You have to understand your algorithms. So it's, how are agencies dealing with it? It's a lot. They're dealing with it in a lot of different ways. They're devoting a lot of resources to it, and they're struggling. I'm going to tell you, it is conversations that we're having, as I said, daily. And it's hard, and will we get a federal kind of framework or mandate? It's July 1st. We're getting into silly season of reelection and midterms. You're not going to see anything from Congress. I know that there's some sort of bipartisan.
They're on vacation
Marsha,
for
whatever her name is, from Tennessee, is kind of taking lead
Yep.
on the Senate side, but you're not going to see anything. And I think,
No.
Getting back to the decisions that happened yesterday, I think the Supreme Court was very, very clear in their disappointment with Congress to fix some of the problems of what they are, to do their job as it is written for them to do.
And Joann, if I had any practical advice just from watching how things play out, if I were an industry player, if I heard a policymaker or regulator say data privacy, I would think about AI.
Of course.
And if they said AI or mentioned AI, I would think about data privacy and underlying that data governance and permissible purpose. But it seems like each one in policymaker world is sort of a shorthand for the other. But a lot of times the AI angst I'm hearing is, if you peel that onion, it's data privacy. And that goes back to sort of the earliest, I think, experts, as AI started working its way into general business population, it was all about data governance. And where did you get the data? Should you have the data? And then how did you use it? And knowing that.
Agreed.
No, I definitely
kinda
think
see-
that you also have whatchamacallit, I think Vermont was the latest state that just announced their new data privacy, and their new laws in Vermont are more intricate than what you have in California, because they're what, 23rd in line, where they're coming up with the new rules, so that they're trying to adapt to the changes that because the industry is changing on a daily basis. How do you make new laws and new rules and regs for a state that's comprehensive enough to manage AI? And the
Yeah.
answer is that
And
you probably can't.
And it seems like you have lawmakers, like they want the law to say, let's say, consumers have the right to say what their data is used for, or something like that. Something that seems like this is a great consumer protection sort of law. But then trying, just like with this, export controls, and you can't have foreign nationals using any Fable product from Anthropic. How a company can actually implement a law like that allows everyone to like fine tune controls as to you can use this for that and this for that. And the lawmakers, it's really not their problem. They don't care about whether this can actually be implemented in any reasonable way. They're just like, well, this is the way we want it to work. Technology, this is your job to try to figure out how to implement that.
Yeah, it's definitely not an easy answer. And then you're going to end up once you do all that, maybe the CFPB is going to end up with more complaints that are coming in, which is my little segue from jumping into our last topic of the day, just about how the CFPB is tightening the complaint rules as disputes topped 5 million. So, what's your guys' thoughts along that line? If the CFPB is now requiring more information on those that are complaining, there's no more quiet complaining. If you complain, they're going to know who is complaining and why they're complaining and everything about the complaint itself. So comments on that.
Yeah,
I'm sure
I
that'll help
guess
them. They can get an AI summary on that.
But you're not going to get it from Anthropic's best.
No, sorry.
No, I mean, as someone that was a collector and furnished debt collection trade lines, and as a policymaker at the CFPB, I've seen both sides of this. I get what they're trying to do. Okay. And I've long believed that when Consumer Response, which is a division that manages the complaint portal, if they know or should have known that there's a campaign to sort of drive up complaints in a particular area, I think they should publicize that. The credit repair companies have hijacked the system, and they're using the complaint database to cause extra work for people who furnish debt collection trade lines, all to get those trade lines removed. They've long had the practice of filing repetitive but not necessarily duplicative disputes under FCRA. And when they do it, they don't just send one to the furnisher. They send the direct dispute, but they send an indirect dispute to all three of the big three credit reporting companies. And then they've learned that they can actually cause a whole bunch more work if they file a complaint with the CFPB. So when I read what they're doing, I generally approve of it, but I think they were trying to build a speed bump, and I think they might have built something more robust that will actually screen out legitimate complaints. I think they're going a little too far, but I get what they were trying to do.
I don't believe the arguments that it's by doing these changes, it's going to prevent legitimate complaints from coming through. I think that's ultimately what was happening. I mean, the dilution of the duplicative, wherever they're going, it's the same complaint with somebody's different name. And that, to me, is harmful for the real people that do have serious complaints. And given that they have, slashed the workforce of the CFPB, how are they possibly going to get to all these complaints? So I don't buy that argument that it is hurting legitimate complaints. I think, look, the portal had its value at the beginning of what it wanted to do, and also it was an ability to kind of view the market, John, right? It was kind of a market monitoring tool to kind of see what was happening in the market and to identify areas where there are weaknesses in the markets. And I get all of that. I also think there was a lot of instances where the complaint portal worked. There was a lot of times
It
where
absolutely did.
Agencies didn't know about a complaint, and this was a way to do it and get it resolved. And there was like a 90% resolution rate, and that was great. And I'm happy, to promote that. But it was also abused. And I think our friend Todd Zwicky used to say that it basically was a financial services Yelp. And the ability to verify a lot of the complaints was also challenging.
And if you read the statute, like what Todd Zwicky said is not a pejorative. That's actually an accurate description of what Congress had in mind, that any expression of consumer dissatisfaction about a financial good or service, it was the place for it. I think industry, I used to have to point to the Title 10 and say, this is what it says. It's not Sentinel. It doesn't mean if you get a complaint that we're going to send, the first private jet full of enforcement attorneys are on their way with a CID in their hand.
Well, It motivated, come on, John. It motivated CIDs. My friend is giving me a look right now.
Driver of attention, John.
Right,
Come
right.
on.
It was, they went to that portal to decide who they were going to investigate and who they weren't. Come on.
Yeah,
Come
no,
on.
no. Listen, I didn't say that it was only a Yelp. I said it was, but it wasn't Sentinel, which was purely a law enforcement. And I will say this: I'm not going to name any names on this panel, but I can't tell you how many industry friends have told me that they were struggling with their mortgage servicer or their big bank that wouldn't give them the time of day. They filed a complaint and they got a phone call and they were able to get it resolved. Like it did a lot of good. Listen, I believe in good data, whether it's the credit reporting systems or whether it's just this. So screening out, and when I read the press release, I first thought, okay, CFPB, or should have known that credit repair companies are engaging in bad practices. Why don't you?
We told you, John. We gave you a list years ago.
And we did
ago.
something.
Roundtable in 2018.
Exactly. Thank you, Stefanie.
And
Thank
what?
you, Stefanie.
And hey, listen. And what did we do? What followed? What followed?
I don't know. What followed?
It's a city in Kentucky. Hint, not Frankfurt, not Louisville, but Lexington law. Lexington law. I mean, we did something about it, but more needs to be done because it is absolutely burying the CFPB with complaints, and they're not really, they're done by third parties. Some are done by bots, but most of it, I think, are finfluencers who are probably financed by credit repair companies. And it's not doing the consumer much good because those trade lines don't affect the FICO scores that much anyway. As a matter of fact, I told Jonah Kaplan once that our very able senior program manager for credit reporting, we've created a monster. The Bureau pushed the open score where we made consumers way more aware of their credit scores than they ever were before. And this country has gone credit score mad, where people with a deep subprime credit score obsess over going up or down 5 points when it's totally meaningless for the price or the access of their credit. But so Steve, I think they went a little too far. I think the complaint database is absolutely great, very valuable for finding bad actors for any regulator. And you know what? Creditors use it to take a look when vetting agencies. And quite frankly, agencies should use it to vet creditors. But like I said, I think they may have gone a little bit too far and made it too hard. It's almost the opposite of what the FTC did when they made it easier for people to file fraud complaints. I don't know if you guys remember that, but I think that was under, I'm not sure who the commissioner was then, but I think it was a Democratic majority. You could go online to the FTC and do basically an identity theft form instead of actually submitting a police report.
So here's my thought. John yes, the complaint database has been a very valuable resource to the Bureau. And that's why I say I think the rule and the recent changes are great, well, and long overdue. Because even under the last administration, the CFPB's database was being abused. It was being abused in a way that was polluting the data. It was being abused in a way that was causing, John, you don't have to confirm or deny it. I'm not asking, but I can't imagine the Bureau. In fact, I'm pretty sure that I was aware that the Bureau was not able to suss through that either. They have limited time, resources, and they are using the complaints to identify whatever they are looking to identify within their current enforcement and oversight priorities. So I say amen. And I'd like to see more restrictions put on the ability of people to submit just absolutely made up frivolous things through AI, through all the technology, whatever
repetitive. And
Yes.
repeating it over and
across
over.
other areas too. Yes, ma'am. Sorry, John. Well overdue. Or long overdue, I should say.
How many press releases did Richard Cordray put out about the millions of complaints? And, we always had to suss that out. Stefanie had to write articles. I had to write articles about really looking at I wrote an article years ago about really looking at the data. They went after payday. It was 2% of the complaints. And they kept saying there was millions of complaints. So there was a lot of embellishment going on. So it's important for everybody, consumers and industry, that the complaint portal gets it right and is accurate.
Accuracy is
Not
really
fake news.
that's what needs to happen is
Not
accuracy.
fake news.
It's
No,
bad for everyone. It's bad for
well, it is.
diligence. It's bad for assessing risk for companies. It's bad
Exactly.
for getting your Better Business rating up. It's bad for the Bureau. It's bad for AGs. It wastes the Bureau and other regulators' time and resources, because how do you suss through this? And I know the Bureau was already trying to work on that.
With
And yes, you
Anthropic.
can.
Oh yeah,
Fable
that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, where's Fable when you need it?
No, I mean,
Yeah,
I do.
right.
Like I said, it is in the toolkit, I think, of consumer advocates sometimes to try to influence policy by jamming up disputes or complaints in a particular area. And I think it's important to be able to suss those out and take a look. And then you may recall, this is all public, but then Director Chopra called out the big three, Equifax, Experian, on TransUnion, on not doing a good job of responding to complaints. And I think it's section 611E of FICRA, and called them out publicly. Like, we never done that before. So
Did he call them a cartel? I think you called them a cartel.
He called them a cartel in a press release. And some of my friends that were at CDIA were actually, I've never seen this person so disappointed and distraught. But yes, he did that. That is in print. He did call it a cartel. But where I was going was 611E called them out on it. The very next, and of course, the big three said, listen, we're getting inundated with these. It's hard to find a complaint from a legitimate consumer with a legitimate problem because we're buried with all these credit repair disputes. The next year we did it again, and he actually, Rohit, you can read it, he softened his stance. So I think even Rohit, who called them a cartel and generally did not like them, backed off a little bit. And by the way, just related to most of our audience who are in debt collection, somebody said to me, I know Rohit Chopra did a backroom deal with the big three to get rid of the medical trade lines under 500. And I said, you know what? Literally, I know what he thinks about the big three. They were the last people in the world like he would cut a backroom deal with. I mean, he dislikes them more than he dislikes debt collectors.
We're going to go ahead and wrap this up, but we're not going to stop talking about it. So, you know what? The Quadcast will continue next month, and we'll move on. Of course, thank you to CSS Impact for sponsoring the Quadcast. Thank you very much to CSS Impact for keeping this going. And then the four of us will work on coming back again next month to talk about what's latest and greatest. I know Illinois just announced they're the second state in the union that's now going to regulate buy now, pay later, which is at least a 20-minute topic with this group.
And junk fees.
Which we can jump all over that. JD Pritzker just signed this. So hey.
And tomorrow, Steve, is Rohit Chopra's first day on the new job. And one final thing, CSS Impact, our lovely sponsor, is not one of the CRMs that I wanted the administration to be angry with.
Of course not. My goodness. No.
We're happy with that. But with that, we're going to go ahead and wrap it up with the Quadcast this month. Thank you to our participants, John, Joann, Stefanie, and Rob, for another enlightening discussion. Look forward to talking again next month. And thanks to everyone for taking the time, and thanks for listening and reading Credit and Collection News. And once again, thanks again for CSS Impact for sponsoring this. With that, we are adjourned, guys. Have yourselves a fabulous rest of the day and a great weekend.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks. Good to see everybody.